أون دوش ميا نتقداش شماخ تأتي ملكوتاخ نهوي سوينخ إكنا دوش ميا أبر حولان لحمة سنكان يومنا واشوق لان حوبين إكنا دابحنا شوقن لحيوين ولا تعلن لنسيونا إلا بصا من بيشا متول دي لاخي ملكوتا حي لو تشبحتا العالم عالمين آمين. Well, today I wanted to talk about Jesus as an innovator. It's something we don't hear much. We hear about him being a revolutionary, a socialist, a rebel. So many titles get given to him, and as you hopefully heard from both Dr. Eriko and myself, we really view him as the Lamb of God. He came with a totally different approach to motivate us and to connect us to each other, and through that connecting us to God. But we don't hear much about the idea of innovation, though it's a very popular topic in today's culture. Everybody talks about entrepreneurship. We see all these billionaires on TV that some are legit and some are crazy, but might be some had some good business ideas or good creations, from the Bill Gates of the world to I'm not going to name names, but the last 40-50 years we're hearing it more and more and more because of the technology advancement and so forth. Well, if we pause a little bit and go back to the early innovators that we've learned about, and I'm talking about, like, biblically speaking, people like Abraham. Abraham was a tremendous innovator from my perspective, because he made a few things that came to us from his life. That if you really study it carefully, you start seeing how he, leaving his homeland in a tribal area, was a very scary idea, but he had that idea, and he felt that he needed, and he heard for him it was God talking to him, or Spirit talking to him, telling him to go and you'll prosper somewhere else, and you'll set up a homeland and so forth. So he left tradition, he left family behind, and went to foreign land, and through peace and wisdom managed to take his whole family and group and place them in a totally different place and live there peacefully. And he understood that the cultural structures and the power structures of his time. So he managed to leverage all of that and create something new. Along the things that he created that were new was this vision of the one God that was different than what his whole family and what he grew up with. So he started viewing a spiritual God, a God that was more of his pal, his friend, that he could talk to, who would help him in the moment of need. He and Sarah laughed at God when he told them at an old age they were going to have a child. So he took the gods that were made up from stone and images and had temples and so forth, and created this spiritual God that was not visible, that was extremely powerful. And it was the early version of God, but Abraham innovated that. He brought it to our awareness. And then moving on in the development of what we call the Judeo-Christian tradition, later Moses came along. Now Moses was a different kind of innovator. He took the idea of Abraham, but he wanted to start a nation. So his innovation was more of like creating a religion. He created the structure for the religion. He put God in a box. So this spiritual God was locked into a box that the tribe would carry from place to place, and he would be behind the curtain in the temple. That's the only place that God would appear. He would only talk to Moses or to the priests. And he created this whole other structure around. He took some of the laws around him and he created a nation and a nation with a religion that we later, called Judaism. But his innovation was around the laws. He, just like Abraham took human sacrifice when he offered God his firstborn son, and depending on your religious background, for Muslims it was Ishmael, for Jewish and Christian people it's Isaac, and he took him in the vision to the mountain and to sacrifice him, because that was the tradition. You sacrifice your firstborn when God asks for it, and he switched that with an animal. That shift in our consciousness and our awareness was, maybe Abraham wasn't the first one to think of it, but he actually, the story that came to us is the one that, carried us forward, took a big step of innovation forward in humanity, that the gods don't require human sacrifice. On the other hand, Moses instituted a lot of sacrifice, not human, but animal sacrifice, to feed his the priestlyhood that he created. That was his innovation. He created priests to take care of the temple, and they were all for the line of blood of his brother. So he came up with some innovations, including some structural innovations and so forth. But then we look at the prophets. And I'm taking us all the way to Jesus. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but if you have questions, that would be great in the Hebrew Bible. So there come the prophets, and they felt that what Moses did to the religion of Abraham was not all good. Some was good, and they were happy with the tribal structures and nations, but they had glimmers of other possibilities, including going back to the religion of Abraham, the simple religion of Abraham. So they constantly spoke against some of Moses's commandments about how to sacrifice. They felt like the priestly structure and God in a temple in Jerusalem and so forth is not really the God that they needed amongst the people everywhere. And that created a lot of trouble within the Jewish nation, the Israelites, and they split and they tried to build a temple somewhere else other than Jerusalem, because Jerusalem was the power of one of the tribes, the tribe of Judah. So the innovation of the prophets was constantly challenging that, and actually reaching out in some cases, like Jonah. He went to the Assyrians. So they started seeing also that this religion that Abraham brought was not an exclusive religion for the Jewish people. They were supposed to take it and become the beacons of light for the whole world. But they struggled because they were also political advisors. Their roles as innovators were more loyal to their tribe, and that's why they were restricted. Their thoughts were restricted to protect the tribal need or the national needs for their nation versus opening up completely. So we don't see a lot. We see peace within, protection within, love within, no slavery within. But once you left the tribal environment and you had the neighboring tribes and neighboring nations, there was friction. And they didn't. You can see, like, all the way to Micah and other or Micha, other prophets. They actually spoke about a time when we could respect the people around us and stop fighting and let them pray to their gods as we pray to our God. And you could see those higher thoughts in the prophets as well. So then there was a period, could be somewhere between 450, 600 years, depending on the scholar's perspective, of no major prophets showing up in the nation of Israel. And I'm sorry, I'm fighting. I'm at the tail end of a cold, so that's why my voice, and sometimes you'll notice that I'm pausing. So during that dark period, a lot of things took place, and the religion got institutionalized in a very strict way. And they set up a lot of committees, and committees, in my opinion, are like the enemy of innovation, or they can be. Sometimes they're helpful because innovation also sometimes needs a little bit of structure, otherwise it can go crazy and fail. So, they set up committees of priests, of the Sadducees. So, that by the time of that Jesus came, there were schools of belief system. They had defined things. The Sabbath was that's one of Moses's innovations. It was great. Moses gave us the weekend, at least one day at the time, and saying, you can take that day for yourself. But so from Moses to the time of Jesus, the Sabbath became a burden on everybody because they started debating. They had time, and they would sit and say, okay, what's relaxing and what's not relaxing? What's work? What's not work? To this day, actually, there is a lot of restriction in the religion around what you can and can't do on the Sabbath. So then we come to Jesus, and where Dr. Errico left, and I want to start with that. Last week is he left us at John chapter I think it's 14:12 or 12:14. 14:12. So if we go to John 14:12. And that's going to be the foundation. I might talk about this next week as well, and talk about the early church and the Eastern church specifically. But in John 14:12, Jesus tells his believers, truly, truly, amen, amen, I say to you, he who believes in me shall do the works which I do, and even greater than these things he shall do, because I am going to my Father. So he's telling us here that as I leave, you will have an opportunity to take the method that I taught you. And he's talking to his disciples here, to the group of people closest to him. And he told them, don't stop the progress based on what you've seen from me. You have an opportunity to take what I built for you, like any innovator would do. Any great innovator that I've met in my life or read about, it sets a foundation. And then other innovators can come, and other very good operational people and financial people and so forth. They can come and build on that. And it's a constant state. We thrive as a race, as a species, not as a race. As a species, we thrive on innovation. We constantly challenge the status quo and move forward, or at least we attempt to. But there is also a lot of people who try to pull us back because they're comfortable in the structure. And a lot of our structures would fall apart if you innovate outside of them. I worked the bulk of my career in American healthcare system and American insurance system, health insurance system. And I can tell you, it's so damn hard to innovate in that field, because it's not hard to come up with good ideas. It's not hard to code and develop new ideas or set up new companies. What is hard is making the rest of the industry come along with you. And the same thing for the method of Jesus. The same thing now became, just like the prophets and the Sadducees and the Pharisees set up a system that Jesus came into, and they were he was challenging that system constantly. And he told us, he said, I have not come to cancel that system or to make it obsolete. I've come to fulfill it, to bring it to its full potential. And then he told us the verse that I just read. And now what I give you, you should be able to take and even go much further with it. So what were his innovations, Jesus's innovations? One of the innovations on the Sabbath is he was asked. They had counters. They had actually people, imagine this, who would sit on the corner or on the middle of the square of the town and keep an eye on how many steps people are walking, who lit the candle, during the day, who walked, who cooked a meal, and they were debating theoretical stuff like, if your animal fell in a ditch, is it okay to leave it in the ditch over the Sabbath, or is it, should you pick it up? What if it's going to die? Is it okay to bring it? So, I mean, stuff that's very philosophical, very dogma oriented. And then once the committee agreed that this is the rule, X number of steps, X number of candles, meal before exact hour, after exact hour, that became an institution, and it became the law. And if you violated it, you had to go through a whole bunch of steps to get yourself out of trouble with the authority, with the people who are watching you. So when Jesus was there, they brought him a paralyzed man with a withered arm, and he said, please heal me. And that this is, and I think it was in a synagogue on the Sabbath, and he basically they're watching him. That the Pharisees were there, the authority was there, and all like, are you going to heal on the Sabbath? And he's like, so he asked them, if your animal did fall in a ditch, would you help the animal out? And they basically agreed that, and there are circumstances that it's okay to do so. So he said, how much more is a human being? How much more important is a human being? And healing them, making them feel comfortable. So he went ahead and broke that rule. He just took a whole set of rules and he broke them because he had compassion. So compassion, in this case, he basically is telling us, your compassion, human need around you for help, for healing, is more important than the rules of the Sabbath, because it was, after all, given to us by Moses. So that's one of his innovations. I have some notes, so I'll give you the verses in case you're interested later to look at them. This is in Matthew chapter 9, verses 1 through 8, the paralytic story. And, unless it's another one that I was going to use for something else later. And another one of Jesus' innovations, he's full of innovations, and I'm going to use, I want to give you verses, and then you can dig deeper into it, because his whole ministry is innovative. And if you don't pay attention to that, you're reading stories that you're familiar with. You're skipping through a whole bunch of stuff that maybe is not familiar to you, or the subtlety of the language, especially if you're not coming from Aramaic or in the Lamza translation, and you'll just look right over it, and you don't think, it's like, oh my God, that we take this for granted today, or oh, we don't even think about this stuff today because we didn't know it was there for us to think about. So one of my favorite innovations of Jesus, and I drive business people crazy when I actually use this one, and I use it often, especially in email communications. So take note of this one. In chapter 5 in Matthew, verse 37. I can read probably a little bit more than 37. What Jesus is talking about here, he's taking basically the commandments in this area of the Bible, and he's breaking them down to root cause. So again, Moses gave us the commandments. He borrowed from other cultures and innovated for his group of people, made the rules around the God of Israel, etc. But then he basically said, don't kill. Jesus's innovation was like, don't have thoughts that could lead into trouble. So he's gone into root cause. Same thing with adultery. It's like, do not commit adultery. Adultery was problematic because it was a law to protect property. It was not a moral law. It was basically to keep people from having trouble with their bloodlines and inheritance and things like that. So Jesus said, if you look at a woman you're not supposed to look at, then you've committed adultery. Then you started the ball rolling into something that could be very dangerous. So that goes deeper into like desire and want and mimetic desire, wanting what other people have, things like that. So he went way deeper into the root cause. But back to his innovation about swearing, because again, the commandments of Moses tell you not to use the name of God in vain. And Jesus said, you can't take anything and swear on it. Actually, in verse 37, but let your words be yes, yes, and no, no. For anything which adds to these is a deception. I'm going to pause it a little bit and let you think about it. Yes, yes, no, no. And if you've been with me in other sessions, I use this often because it's not used enough, or it's not mentioned enough in church or in talks. So we often have clarity around in anything we're being asked. You know, do you want to do this? Typically, like your gut feeling is I do or I don't. Whether it's because you're lazy or you don't feel like it or you don't have the funds to do it, or whatever it is, the reason for it. But if you hesitate, then you're trying to work your way out of committing to an exact answer, and typically get yourself in more trouble, and maybe even end up having to do something you didn't really want to do, or missing out on something you really wanted to do. So think about just a communication from a communication perspective, especially in the age of communication. If your texts, if your emails, you know, especially the long paragraph emails that drive me crazy, that now you can respond to them with a yes and no. Like you can go through the whole thing and say, for the first question, it's a yes. The second one is a no. I agree, I disagree. Keep it simple, and how much clearer will our relationships be, our communication would be, and our desires would be communicated as well. All the way to probably at some point where people won't talk to you, like happens with me sometimes. So this is one of his innovations. And another one of my favorites is, again, if you read chapter 5 of Matthew and maybe 6 and 7, I got stuff in 12. So there's a whole bunch of areas that Jesus touched on. That this is probably the most challenging teaching of Jesus's. I don't think there is a Christian in the world who disagree with me that this is the most challenging teaching, and yet it is probably one of the most ignored one. It's mentioned, everybody knows it, and that's the one where he says, "Love your enemy," because the foundation of his religion is love. He taught, again, greatest commandment is love your neighbor as yourself. When they asked him. When his apostles wanted to know how they'll know them, he didn't give them like a team logo, you know, or a cross or a lamb, even an image of a lamb. He didn't give them anything to identify themselves. He told them one thing: they'll know you by the way you love one another. And of course, he in different areas he said they'll know you by your works. So that's another thing. There is no identification for a Christian. Today we can tell an Eastern Orthodox and a Catholic and so forth by the way they cross themselves, left to right, right to left, the type of cross they wear. Does it have a Jesus on it? Does it have a human image of Jesus? Is it plain? Are they not wearing a cross? Is the cross square? Is the thing up to the top? Is it to the bottom? So we have all these ways of isolating types of Christians, while truly the way we should know if you're a follower of Jesus is two things. Do you love one another? Do you love everybody? Do you love your enemies? Do you love your neighbor as yourself? So I mean, love. He's constantly preaching that. It's like the way they'll know you, and then by your works. So one of his innovations, I wish if I was like building the Church of the Lamb, that would be what's on the wall. Love your enemy. And I would love to see all the enemies of that church come in so we can give them hugs. So, I mean, and he said, so that you may become sons of your Father who is in heaven. I mean, it's the highest level of love. If you can break through all the stuff you grew up with racial, political, even the minutiae stuff that makes you dislike people in the office or in the neighborhood or in school, or people you think about in the past. That's another thing of his innovations. He put it right in the Lord's Prayer. And forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Okay, so the trick to innovation and around forgiveness, it's not like Moses. Basically, you could go to the temple and take a pigeon or take a lamb or take a, this or that. He had a whole sheet of what you can do to obtain forgiveness from God. But Jesus's method is that you can obtain forgiveness from God when you forgive the people who erred against you, who you are carrying something with you, either against them or about them, that you need to release. So forgiveness is release. You need to release everybody from anything they've ever done to you that's bad. And this is historical. That's from the moment you're aware of what they did, or aware of being a being, to the moment that you go away. So a constant stream of forgiveness to be a part of Jesus's kingdom. I think, I mean, maybe you don't think it's innovative. I hope you do. But I prefer, just like when I was getting into my ministry early on, a minister who was a very good friend of mine asked me about what would you do? What is the most precious thing that you have? Because at the time I was doing very well financially, my job was good, and I was always happy to write my tithing check. And I thought about it as money, that the thing that's most important. And at that age, it should have been maybe. But I told the minister that time is my most precious asset. And the minister told me, okay, you don't have to write me checks, which I think they knew that I would anyway. But I want you to volunteer your time. And that was hard. That was hard, because that was giving something up that I really cared about, more than money. And that was the beginning of me opening up, and that was the beginning of me attending some of Dr. Eriko's seminars, and sometimes traveling to do that, as well as volunteering. At the time, I volunteered with the children's ministry, which required me reading and preparing stories, and then going there early to receive the kids before so it was a big commitment. And that's when my wife came in and told me one day, because I like to do the children ministry and then go home or go do my weekend stuff. And she told me, and she went into the service. There's this dude named Rocco Eriko who's talking at the church. You got to come and hear him in the second service. And that was my first time ever being exposed to this. So if I didn't accept that form of giving, that form of letting go, I probably would have never been, I wouldn't be talking to you today. So it's about release, it's about surrender, and Jesus was a master in that. And he never took credit. He said by my name, by my method, but he always put the goodness that it's coming through the God system. It's God's kingdom, not Jesus's kingdom, not the Christ's kingdom. It was always God's kingdom. It was the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of God, depending on where you're reading it. So his main, he brought all these people. And if you read, the Bible is not sequential by any means, because you see that the apostles were with him, and then you see that he was selecting the apostles. And maybe that happened. Maybe he recruited people who started following him, and they were around him and close to him. But then he finally said, hey, you're the ones who are going to be with me all the time. And we absolutely have to remember that these were young men, probably late teens, maximum early 20s. Nobody wise like the ones we see in church, the images of St. Peter and so forth, with the big beards and balding and so forth, would follow a man of Jesus's age. He had to establish his ministry, and then he would pick up young students who would come and learn under him and be as pure as can be. Because if he picked up 12 6 Sadducees and 6 Pharisees who were learned and knew the Bible inside out, that we would never have the message of Jesus in our hands today, because it's innovative, and those committees would have never agreed to publish what he did and the way he did it or the way he said it. How am I doing on time? Oh my goodness, I'm already half hour in, and I'm just touched on a few things. I put a note here, but let me see what it's about, because I didn't put next to it. Well, it's since I put it here, because in chapter 6, verses 31 through 33 of Matthew still, therefore do not worry or say, what will we eat, or what will we drink, or with what will we be clothed? Since I'm talking about innovation, and often innovation today is associated with business, for worldly people, this subtlety in verse 32 is really important. For worldly people, seek after all these things: clothes, food, drink, materialistic possessions. Your Father in heaven knows that all of these things are also necessary for you. So he does not poo-poo the idea that I need a roof over my head, or a car to go to work, or food on my table to nourish myself. He does not say, ignore all that stuff and walk away. He's saying, God knows that you need it. So don't worry about it. First of all, worrying, and he tells us this in the same area of the chapter, does not make a difference. You can't change as the color of a hair on your head. You can't. Worrying never makes anything change. So then, but seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you. So the trick, the innovation, is not saying I don't need a house. Is stop worrying about needing a house. And I know it's hard for us, especially in today's economy, with the message that's constant around us right now in the media: inflation, depression, war, and here is Hani in 2023 telling us you don't need to worry about your bills and your job and your food. And that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying your focus needs to be on the kingdom of heaven, on you being a good person, on you being a loving person, and all these things shall be added to you. You'll get all the blessings that you need, and all your needs will be covered. And that it's hard. That's faith. But that's faith based on knowledge, not faith based on some woo-woo crazy theology. This is based on if you're a good person in your neighborhood, I guarantee you that you will not be starving. If you have good friends, and if you have a lot of people that you love, including people who might consider you as an enemy, you will not have a need. If you have a job, you'll be secure in your job if you are the loving employee that you should be. You need to take the system. You can't pick bits and pieces of it. You need to continue to work, and it's a constant state of work. All these innovations don't just happen by themselves or by reading about them. You're not going to be the next guy or person who's going to invent the iPhone. You need to put the work into it to create that type of innovation. And with Jesus's innovation, remembering that we're supposed to take this foundation, which is very basic, and build and build and build and build on it. Not hold it like religion today. A lot of religions the reason religion actually struggles to grow, especially in the West, is that it tries to anchor us in the time of Jesus, and in the time of the early church, and in the time of those different councils. Those councils said to believe you must say this, this, and that, and they still hold on to that. And the whole service on Sunday in a lot of churches is reciting your belief system and this and that. And so it's a lot of like routine and tradition. But imagine if we were meeting in church talking about how to innovate further in Christianity. And some of the stuff that hopefully I'll get into next week is how the early church was innovative when they got out of Galilee and Judea and Jerusalem and started traveling. Who do you think they met? They met pagans, they met Buddhists, they met Romans, they met Greeks. All these people had belief systems. All these people had their own moral code and their own boundaries and their own innovation. To this day, all these religions exist. Same thing that happened with Islam. Islam came out of Saudi, of Mecca and Medina. And as they expanded, they started running into people they've never met before. Few of them maybe did because they were traders and so forth. But they ran into cultures, and the more they expanded, the more they ran into other cultures. And in the early stages of Islam, as was the early stages of Christianity, they had to figure out ways to work together. So I'll get into that hopefully next week more. I only see one question to me. So, and I already have another one. So I think I had this a question. That's a follow-up question from last week, the one that's there. So anyway, if you have questions to me, please throw them at me as I continue to talk via the chat. Just send me the message directly. Another of Jesus' innovation, which you have to understand it in the context of culture. So in the Near East, the structure, especially in Semitic cultures, and it's not exclusive to Semitic, it's not exclusive to Jewish people. I am Semitic. There are a lot of Semitic people, and it's a term taken from the Bible. But ultimately, family is the nucleus. Family is the first thing, and family always comes after that. Comes the larger family into the tribe into the tribal alliances and so forth. So this is so subtle, and Jesus is sitting with his apostles, his students, his supporters. He was in the house of one of his supporters. There were women in the group as well, which probably wasn't kosher in the time of Jesus, or not very. But these are people who are actually opening their minds, and they're starting to look at the world differently than how they were raised or how the culture wanted them to think. And then a man said to him, this is verse 47, chapter 12, who told your mother and your brothers are standing outside and they want to speak with you. So now this is blood showing up at the door, knocking, saying, hey, son, come out. We want to chat with you. But he answered, this is Jesus saying to him, who told him, who is my mother and who are my brothers? And he pointed his hand to his disciples and said, behold, my mother, and behold, my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and my sister and my mother. Reading the Bible, this would be just another moment of Jesus, basically, blah, 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 right? But, and I don't blame the church, and I don't blame a lot of today's teachers for maybe skipping over this and saying it's meaningless, especially with the way we put Mary, and a lot of the new Christians. Mary became a major figure in the church early on, and Mary caused a lot of the definition of the Virgin Mary, the mother of Jesus, caused a lot of the early heretics, and blood was people lost their lives over her place in the early religion. And here is Jesus from his own mouth. I wish I was sitting in those councils to read them this part. And I think there were some really good learned men who and maybe women, but most likely men, who said, hey, wait a minute. He told us, he didn't stop his conversation and jump up and down and told everybody to disperse, let my mom in. She's the Virgin Mary after all. He didn't do that. He actually took this moment to teach them, your alliance is not to your bloodline. Your alliance is not to your mother and your father and your brothers, or your tribe. Your alliance is with the people who do the work of the kingdom. That's your family. And that's, again, it's expanding. He's expanding our consciousness, because in his work constantly, he talks to the Samaritans, he talks with the Roman soldiers. He's opening up something new, he's innovating. And his biggest innovation, which I probably will get into next week because I only have 20 minutes left, is his perspective of God. So with that, I'm going to try to answer your questions. I'll start with the one that came to me by email, and then hopefully I triggered a few thoughts for you to ask me more questions. Give me a second so I can read it faithfully from the email. Okay, so this has to do with Jesus's work and miracles, and I have a whole bunch of examples. I probably can talk another half an hour at least on this, but I've been wondering about Jesus and miracles for a long time. Although I greatly believe in Jesus, I thought maybe the miracles were myths, and the person is okay with myths because they do have a place in our lives, and they serve a purpose. Now, however, after a year of mystical study, I am reassessing miracles. What are your thoughts on miracles? I have heard some people use the word flashy for miracles, and that Jesus was being flashy. And the person puts her comments after that, or maybe it was added by the church. So the miracles of Jesus, it's if we bundle them into the miracles of Jesus, I think our mind immediately goes to his healing, the loaves and fishes miracle, which was mentioned a couple times. Anything that seemed sort of walking on the water, water into wine, and those are the things that you'll hear from church. Now, if you look closely at each one of these episodes, if you don't take the label miracle and just toss a whole bunch of verses under it and say, hey, this dude was doing things that were just amazing and nobody will ever be able to repeat them. Or maybe if you can figure one unique one, or I don't know what you qualify for to become a saint in some churches, one or two miracles, and that would make you extra special, and then we can build churches and name them after you. And I'm being tongue-in-cheek because I know that a lot of those churches are built with the names of people who did some really awesome work. But was it a miracle? So Jesus's miracles can be broken down into each episode, and you have to study each episode. So in the episodes where he is healing, he's definitely using healing methods that are available for him, that he learned and saw and was practicing. There is the first one I wrote down is in Matthew chapter 8, verses 2 through 4. And I'll read it just because it breaks down what he did. And behold, a leper came and worshipped him. And this actually addresses the idea of flashy. A leper came and worshipped him. And when we say worshipped him, he basically paid homage. He's like, hey, I'm in the presence of a rabbi, a respected rabbi, and I need a favor from him. So it doesn't mean that he, made him God and prayed for him. Worshipped him means he paid homage. He basically showed him respect. And said, my Lord, if you wish, you can cleanse me. So this is a leper. And in the time of, this is all the way from, like, you can find it in Leviticus. I think I put a note here, Leviticus, like chapter 14. You can see that leprosy, which was any skin condition, including in some cases like skin cancer, was viewed in a scary way. They didn't have a way to, they didn't have the same creams and things like that. And even to this day, that we are challenged when it comes to that disease. So here's a man saying, I have some issues, can you help me? And Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him, and he said, I do wish it, be cleansed. And in that hour, his leprosy was cleansed. So you'll notice there are many episodes. It's the person's belief system. It's the person's inner soul knowing that with the help of this healer, I'm going to be healed. We almost have that today. We don't think of it that way because we're very scientific minded, that I have an appointment tomorrow with my physician, and it's going to be a discussion and probably an argument because I've done my research. I don't think that the doctor is going to have all the answers to my questions. So it's going to be a discussion. Now, if I went in with a condition that I know is healable, and that this doctor is fully capable of healing me and not giving me other asterisks, as you see in all the commercials on TV these days, especially for medications. And the condition I have is one of those conditions where it's like, yeah, we can fix this, but if you have any of these other conditions, don't take these medications. Or if you do take these medications, you might get a whole bunch of other conditions. So this is today's scientific approach to health. And I totally, as I said, I work in healthcare. I work with doctors. I love them. I am in a startup. My co-founder is a physician. So I'm not poo-pooing our approach today because it's very advanced and we're saving a lot of lives. But I'm saying that at the bottom of healing is often, first of all, it's self-generated. We're built to heal. You cut yourself, you're going to stop bleeding. You have a cold like me, a bug came in, my immune system is fighting the heck out of it, and after 3, 4, 5 days, it's going to go away. So the more complicated diseases that we have, besides root cause and so forth, we're breaking new ground and fixing things in a much better way. So, but here Jesus said to him, look, why are you telling it to men? So as soon as he healed him, what did that man do? Miracle. Look, I am healed. He healed me. It's like, Go first and show yourself to the priests and present an offering as Moses has commanded for a testimonial to them. So Jesus was aware that he performed the healing, because that man believed that he could be healed and his rash was taken away. But then he told them, I didn't do a miracle. Now, if you stop reading, you think, oh, that's it. But he almost rebuked him. He said, stop telling people about this. For you to be reintegrated into society and be back into, let back into town, you need to go to the priest. You need to do what Moses told you to do. There are a few specific steps to be cleared. The priest will inspect you. You'll do an offering, thanking God, and then you'll get basically your papers that you can go back to the family and be fine in society. And just a total side note, unrelated about leprosy, if you were totally covered, this is in Leviticus, you'll find it. It's the same area of Leviticus that has that they call them like the holy, as like the completeness rules. That's where you find people with goatees acting not like being a man and goat, and therefore they could be stoned to death. That's where we get some of the thoughts about what we call today homosexuality, which wasn't what it was called back then. But all these thoughts were by those people. So for leprosy, if you were fully covered by a rash or had skin cancer from the top of your head to your toes, because you were whole in it, they let you, they kept you in society, even though you could be the most infectious person, but because they had a black and white formula, and you passed if you were all covered in sores or in a rash. Again, we're talking about thousands of years of early thinking of our advancement here. So I hope that covers it, but I have another example about Jesus's flashiness. Chapter 9, verse 28 to 30. And when he came into the house, the same blind men came up to him Jesus said to them, do you believe that I can do this? See, again, do you believe that I can do this? Their belief system, their inner soul had to actually be involved in the healing. And he was going to be a vehicle to in between to bring in the healing energy. Do you believe that I can do this? They said to him, yes, our Lord. Yes, teacher. Then he touched their eyes and said, let it be according to your faith. And immediately their eyes were opened, and Jesus charged them and said, see that no one knows it. If he was advertising himself as this miracle worker and wanted to attract people, that came on early in his ministry in the desert experience. Moses was flashy. Everything Moses did, he wanted people to believe in him as a leader. Jesus was the exact opposite. He was meek. He did the good things and told people, don't tell anybody about them. And sometimes culturally, that's almost like giving them permission, okay, to share, right, with the right people. But don't make a lot of noise, because he was constantly in trouble. A lot of his healings, when he healed the two mentally ill people and told them, yes, go ahead and push the swine into the water, the village came after him and they wanted to kill him. So he was careful, and he knew that he was doing some things that could upset other people, including healing on the Sabbath and so forth. So was he flashy? No. Was he what were his miracles? Miracles, I think you can see some of them as miracles, like what he did with the loaves of, the way that the TV shows it and the way ministers talk about it. He had these followers, and they've been following him for 3 days, and he had compassion. He found them, some of them were getting weak and starving, and he was going to move on and was going to send them home. So he told his disciples, I don't want to just let them go. They'll fall ill, and they've been basically fasting, some of them, because you're in Galilee, you're in an arid land. Water is hard to find, and if you had some water with you and you were with him for 3 days, or sitting there listening and camping for 3 days, you probably a lot of people ran out of their supplies, and now they were facing, okay, we have to walk back to the village. So what he did then is he told his disciples, hey, bring me what we have. And they had 7 loaves of bread and 7 fishes. And loaves of bread, you're not talking about like baguettes or big Italian bread. It's probably the Middle Eastern, we call it sage, or it's lavash type bread, where it's folded into, it ends up being a huge sheet, but it can fit into a very small space. And then they probably had some dried fish with them. And he said, let's do this. Let's stop passing that, and we'll feed the whole group. So, and the group was fed, and there were leftovers. And the other story, the baskets were passed with some of the food in them. And so what happened there is he touched the inside, the heart of the rest of the people who were attending his talks. They spent 3 days with him. They were opening up. They're learning how to love one another and love their enemies, and give, and not worry about their possessions, and do the works of the kingdom. So this is, if you're listening to these messages, and then and you have hidden an extra piece of bread, or an extra piece of dried fish, or dried figs, or anything like that, and that's how people traveled. They carried that stuff with them, especially if they knew that they were going to be staying away from home for either on a road journey or following a teacher like this. So, and we do it today. I've been in many meetings where somebody would go like, I just traveled and I haven't had a chance to stop and eat. Does anybody have anything? And we all reach in our computer bags or luggage or pockets, and we always have a breakfast bar, or, it's like, hey, here's a piece of chocolate. It will sustain you until lunch or whatever. So we do that. We share when we are with people we love. And that's what was happening. Now, these were a lot of strangers. They're not used to, like, a guy from the other village or a woman wearing that dress. I mean, in this miracle, they tell us that they fed 4,000 men plus the women and children. So that tells you that their hearts were fully opened. And yes, when a loaf came by, and I had more, I passed it and I added to it, and I made it 2 loaves, or a loaf and a piece of fig fruit, or something like that. And those were his miracles. When you understand the culture and the context of what he was doing, it wasn't some elevator, like we would see in a mansion where the food is coming up and down from the sky. So and to me, that is a miracle in that he opened hearts of strangers to share with each other, people who you've never met before. If you have more questions like that, specific examples you want me to break down, I can go through that one of my other sessions. So with that said, I don't know how much time I have left. 4 minutes. Rabbi, do you want to answer your question and make announcements?
I'm sorry, I cannot get to the questions because 4 minutes won't cover it for me.
Okay, so you'll do it next week. Okay.
Next week, when I do the teaching next week, I have 2 major questions, very important ones. One is on John 3:16, and the other is on a parable. So I want to get to those, and I don't have time to discuss it. But I will say this. The special announcement I had is some of you who were part of our program, Christmas program, you heard Rebecca Johns, who is an Assyrian, and she's a wonderful teacher, and she is really working with the Aramaic scriptures, and she also does some holistic teachings too, physically. I have a special announcement to make for her, and in my book, Let There Be Light. Let me put this on right here.
I have it, Rabbi. Here it is.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then I'll put me back on here. Okay. There's the Let There Be Light. That is the course on the 7 keys that unlock the scripture. And it's an overall view. What I did is I was asked to speak on the Bible for 5 days, 1 hour each day. This is when I was still working with Dr. Lamza. And he said, can you teach the entire Bible in 5 hours? And at first I was shocked that he asked me such a thing, but something in me prompted and said, yes, I can do it. And then I hung up because he says, if you can't do it, we'll wait for Dr. Lamza to have his operation on his eyes, because he was having cataracts and he had to get him the cataracts removed. And Dr. Lamza wanted me to speak for this group of graduating ministerial students. And I talked to the man, and he told me that he wanted for the ministerial students to have a complete course on what it is to develop Eastern eyes and seeing the Bible through the eyes of the Near East. And that's when the 7 keys came to me, the 7 things that is an overall picture of all of Dr. Lamza's work and translation from Aramaic, all the key points, how you can learn from it. Where in case, instead of getting involved in commentaries, this book, Let There Be Light, will do it for you as an overall picture. So Rebecca Johns is starting a special on that class. And let me see, she gave it to me here. She's doing a 10-week program starting February 5th. That's on, I believe it's on a Sunday, February 5th. I don't have a calendar in front of me, but it's February 5th at 4 o'clock. And for 10 weeks, she will teach the 7 keys that unlock the scripture using my book, Let There Be Light. So we don't have anyone here that's going to be teaching, and I've taught it all my life. And Hanny also taught it too, but she's going to be teaching it. And here is what you need. You need to register. And here is her phone number, 989-272-1199. That's the number you call to register. I don't know if there's a charge or what she's going to do. She'll talk to her if you want to take the course on the 7 keys that give you and develop Eastern eyes, Near Eastern eyes, so you can understand the scriptures based on my book. And so I told her I would announce it. I will announce it tonight, and I'll announce it next Wednesday before she starts the course. Okay, here's the phone number again, 989-272-1199. And that is Rebecca Johns.
And if you didn't get any of that, if you can reach to the foundation, you can send us an email and we can share that information or forward it to Rebecca as well.
Good, thank you. So I will see you all next week. And thank you, Hanny. That was a wonderful lesson tonight.
Thank you. Thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your evening, and we'll see you next week.